My name's Jane Kilcher, and I'm working with Emily Rydell on her dredge up in Nome. I love being on the dredge, and we're getting gold. I definitely have gold fever. People probably know me best from Alaska Last Frontier.
Jane Kilcher has finally broken her silence about Atz Lee, and what she revealed has left fans in disbelief. After years of holding back, of carrying the weight quietly, the truth is finally surfacing. What happened behind the scenes was more complicated, but Jane didn't tell the whole story. What she did say was enough to change how everyone sees it. Stick around because the silence is over, and the truth is nothing like we expected. The beautiful love story. Before the cameras, the show, and the fans, it was just Jane and Atz Lee. Two people who grew up in the same small part of Alaska, leading different lives, later found themselves brought back together. Jane was from Home, Alaska. She was known for being sharp, hardworking, and someone who never backed down from a challenge. Before she began her homestead life, she worked as a nurse. She was accustomed to long days and stressful moments, but nothing had prepared her for the kind of life she would later choose, a life far away from town, deep in the cold, wild parts of Alaska. Atz Lee was a Kilcher. His family had been living off the land for generations. His father, Atz Sr., was part of a long line of homesteaders who made survival a way of life. He had been raised to hunt, fish, build, and live close to nature. His life was not always easy, but it shaped him into someone who knew how to navigate the most challenging aspects of Alaska. The Kilcher family had been living off the land in Homer, Alaska for generations, long before the show Alaskan Frontier ever began. The Discovery Channel is known for Alaskan-based shows like Deadliest Catch and Gold Rush. They were looking for authentic family-based frontier stories. The Kilchers stood out for being a real family and for truly living off the land, and that was how the show began. Alaskan: The Last Frontier is a reality TV series that aired on Discovery from December 2011 to November 2022. It chronicled the lives of the Kilcher family, descendants of Swiss pioneer Ewell Kilcher, as they continued to homestead on more than 600 acres outside Homer, Alaska. The show has 11 seasons and more than 170 episodes. Viewers watch the Kilchers hunt, farm, build shelters, preserve food, and prepare for the brutal Alaska winters, all without modern heating or plumbing. The series is about generational self-sufficiency and traditional skills, with cast members like Otto, Atz, Jane, and Atz Lee reflecting a life deeply rooted in the land. Unlike more scripted reality shows, it leans toward authenticity, that is, showcasing everyday challenges and survival in an extreme environment. Jane and Atz had known each other when they were younger. They grew up in the same hometown and area, but they went their separate ways for a while. Life happened, and each of them had their paths, relationships, and struggles. Years later, they met again, both older, changed, and carrying a little more weight on their shoulders. This time, something had changed. They understood each other. Jane once said it just felt right, and that he felt like the one. Atz Lee had returned to the homestead after some time away traveling, and Jane, who had a background in nursing and commercial fishing, joined him full-time on the show after their marriage. They were not chasing fame. Instead, they wanted to share their way of life with several people, and they enjoyed doing it. Atz Lee already had a son named Etienne from a previous relationship, and Jane also had a daughter named Piper. When they got married, it was not just about being husband and wife. It was about becoming a family, and that is never easy, but they made it work in the way real families do, with effort, patience, and a lot of love. Their home was not a regular home. They lived off the grid, where the power came from what you built, and you ate what you hunted. It was a place where you had to think ahead just to stay warm through the winter. Every day was work, and every day was survival. What kept them going most days was their decision to do it all together. In 2011, when Alaska: The Last Frontier first aired on television, Atz Lee, one of the main family members, immediately became a part of it. Jane, at first, stayed in the background. It did not take long for viewers to notice her. She was funny, strong, and real. She said what she thought, and she did not try to act for the cameras. Jane was just being herself. That was what made her stand out. She fished in freezing water, dragged gear through the snow, and faced danger without flinching, and she did it all with her sharp sense of humor. Soon she became one of the most loved people on the show. She brought balance. Where Atz Lee was quiet and serious, Jane brought energy. She was open, honest, and she made the hard life they lived look not easy, but possible. What many people did not see was how much she protected their children. From the start, Jane was clear about one thing. Their children would not be part of the show. Etienne and Piper were rarely shown on camera, and that was not by accident. Jane knew what it meant to be watched, judged, and picked apart by strangers online. She wanted her kids to grow up safe and private, away from the prying eyes of the public. That alone showed what kind of mother she was. Even while she worked hard on the homestead, filmed for the show, and helped keep the family going, she kept her children away from the spotlight. She made sure they had a normal life behind the scenes. As the show grew, so did their fame. People all over the country began watching the Kilchers every season. Fans admired their way of life, the old tools, the hunting trips, and the harsh winters that came with it. Moreover, they admired the bond between Jane and Atz Lee. Viewers saw them as strong, loyal, and resilient, capable of overcoming anything. To many people watching, they were a dream team. Two tough people who could survive off the land and still laugh while doing it. Jane and Atz Lee became one of the most followed couples on the show. Their story was not scripted for the cameras, it was real, and that made it powerful. What fans did not see was the quiet work it took to hold that life together. Off camera, they were raising two kids, balancing public life with private life, and managing a marriage in the middle of the wild. There were no vacations, no easy days. Just the two of them trying to make it work while the cameras kept rolling. For a while they did. They smiled on screen, worked side by side, and showed up together season after season. But real life is never just what you see on television. At first, they seemed to have everything figured out. Like most stories, the beginning is only one part, and the next part, the part no one saw coming, was just around the corner. The cracks.
Bear, it's not a guaranteed thing. It's kind of a process. If they didn't get a bear, I definitely wanted to make sure that something was going to be in the freezer.
For years, Jane and Atz Lee Kilcher presented a strong front to the world. Life in Alaska was never easy, but they faced it together, building, fishing, raising kids, and surviving long winters. Behind the scenes, things were shifting. Slowly and quietly at first, but in a way that was impossible to ignore. One of the biggest turning points came in August 2015. That was when Atz Lee had a serious accident. He suffered a devastating fall while hiking near Otter Cove in Alaska's Kachemak Bay. The accident occurred when he slipped off a cliff and fell nearly 40 feet. He was not filming at the time, but was reportedly on a personal trip with a friend. The injuries were severe and life-threatening that he had to be airlifted by a medevac helicopter to the hospital where he was treated for a shattered arm, broken shoulder, fractured ankle and hip, 2 punctured lungs, and more than a dozen broken ribs. His recovery process was long, painful, and challenging. Jane Kilcher informed fans that it would take time and patience for him to make a full recovery, and the family also appreciated the love and support they received. Over the following months, Atz Lee kept followers updated through social media by posting X-ray images of his broken bones and sharing his physical and emotional journey. 1 year later, he reflected on the experience by saying, "It's been a hard recovery, but I can't complain, all things considered. I still have my health, family, and friends, and that is a blessing for sure." The accident had a lasting impact on his life, forcing him to slow down and reevaluate everything from his physical capabilities to his emotional well-being and family relationship. Jane was right there through all of it. She cared for him, handled things at home, and ensured the family continued to function while he healed, all without falling apart. On screen, you could still see her smiling or making a joke, but behind those moments was a woman carrying the full weight of a hard life alone. Atz Lee recovered, at least on the outside. However, something inside him had changed. Maybe it was the trauma, fear, or maybe it was the way near-death moments shift your mind. Whatever it was, the man who came back was not the same man Jane had married. He became more distant, quieter, less involved. He began pulling away, not just from Jane, but from everything. He spent more and more time in the woods working on his cabin, far from the main homestead. He said it helped him feel grounded. It gave him peace. Jane tried to understand him. She supported him the way a partner does. It was hard not to feel the distance growing. She was still at home, raising their daughter, keeping the house running, fishing, cooking, managing everything, and now she was doing it without him beside her. At first, she probably brushed it off, telling herself that it was just a phase. The accident had shaken him, and he needed time to recover. Time kept passing, and not much changed. Atz Lee would come back for short periods, help with something, then disappear again. Their children were also changing. Etienne, Atz Lee's son from a previous relationship, was getting ready to leave home. Jane's daughter, Piper, was becoming a teenager and wanted her privacy. She stayed off camera by choice, and Jane respected that completely. With the kids growing up and Atz Lee pulling away, Jane felt increasingly isolated, as if she were living on an island. The show continued, but fans who had followed them from the early seasons started to notice something different. Jane was still doing the work, still pulling her weight, but her spark was dimming. She rarely spoke about Atz Lee online. She only posted about her fishing trips, nature, and her love for her children, but the warmth she once shared about her marriage was missing. When fans asked about it, she kept her answers short and kind. Atz Lee, too, had started changing on screen. He seemed less present. Sometimes he was only in a few scenes each season. Other times he was working on projects far away from the rest of the family. He seemed focused on being alone and building something just for himself. For Jane, this was not just about space. It was about feeling like she was slowly being left behind. She had stood by him through his worst moment, through pain and fear and months of recovery, and now, as she tried to keep their family going, she felt that connection was slowly slipping away. They were still living under the same roof and appearing on the same show, but something between them had changed. Deep down, they were no longer building the same life. Some people close to them say they did try to work it out. They went to therapy, had long talks, and tried to meet in the middle. But trying is hard when both people want different things. Atz Lee wanted personal space and distance, while Jane wanted connection and teamwork. Every time he chose to go deeper into the woods, to build something alone, the message felt clearer and clearer. Jane was tired not just from work, but from holding everything up without help. However, she kept showing up. For the cameras, the children, and the people who watched and supported her. But even strong people have limits. The emotional weight grew heavier each season. On screen, they still had their moments. They still shared a task here or there, but the energy was different. The tension was quiet, but it was there. And that is often how it happens. Marriages do not always break because of one big mistake. Sometimes they wear down over time. From silence, distance, and too many days where no one says how they feel. From moments when one person keeps showing up while the other slowly fades out. Jane had chosen this life. She had given up her old world, her nursing job, and everything she knew to be part of something bigger, the family, the land, and the dream they both once shared. Over time, she realized she was living that dream mostly on her own. The accident may have been the spark that ignited the situation. What followed was the slow burn of two people becoming strangers in the same place. By now, the marriage had become a routine affair. The love that once felt so solid had become distant. Deep down, Jane had not forgotten. She was still trying to keep it going, hoping that maybe things would turn around, but they didn't. Though neither one of them had said the word out loud yet, the truth was clear. This was no longer a partnership. It was one person staying for the family, the work, the duty, and another searching for something he could not seem to find at home. Once the realization is set in, the next step is to accept it. The breaking point. For years, Jane and Atz Lee Kilcher tried to hold it together. Through the silence, through the distance, through the quiet sadness that had settled between them, they kept going. But eventually they realized that it was not working. By the time the divorce occurred, it was no surprise to those paying attention. Fans had noticed the change. Jane appeared more and more on her own. Atz Lee was barely around. Their smiles began to look like routine rather than joy. Their life, once full of teamwork and connection, had become two people living separate lives under the same roof. It is difficult to pinpoint the exact moment the decision was made. It did not erupt from one enormous fight. It came from years of slow disconnection. Jane continued to show up, working hard, raising her daughter, and holding the family together. Atz Lee, on the other hand, gradually drifted away, disappearing into the woods, retreating to his solitude, and becoming emotionally distant. Etienne had already left for college, and Piper, Jane's daughter, was growing rapidly and trying to figure out her life. The homestead itself grew quieter, but it was not a peaceful place. Jane did not give up because she held on to the belief that they could fix the marriage. She continued to hold things together, not only for herself, but for what they had built. For years, she had sustained the dream, the family, the partnership, and the life they shared, but love cannot survive on memory and hope alone. Eventually, the cracks became too large to ignore. The homestead carried on, but the emotional connection had faded. When fans noticed and asked, Jane remained reserved, offering only subtle acknowledgement. In 2023, she said something that did not shock the fans who have been following them for a while. She posted on her social media platform that, "Here we go. Atz Lee is divorcing me, and it is very unfortunate, but I cannot control it. Lost my best friend and it hurts, but I guess that is life." The words were simple, but it was laced with sorrow, resignation, and pain. It was a private pain shared in public, the ending of a partnership that had once been a beacon of strength. She also did not hesitate to defend herself whenever she was being criticized. Some people tried trolling her, and her response was that of a woman who is not afraid to stand up and protect her family. In a Facebook post dated back to 2023, where she was getting trolled for an accidental black eye, and her daughter was also facing some heat, she shared something no one expected. "This is not okay. This black eye happened on TV when I got scooped, and leave my kids alone. My girl isn't and hasn't been part of reality TV, and the facts are not even straight when y'all go after her. Leave my family alone and come after me." There were no harsh words or blame, just a plea to protect the children and honor what they once had. Even amid heartbreak, she spoke of decency and respect. Jane never turned her pain into a public spectacle. She did not rant or accuse. Instead, she focused on healing her daughter and on moving forward with courage. It was never about being right. It was about survival. The end of their marriage was not loud. There were no headlines because most people saw it coming. Even with that, for some fans, it was hard. Jane and Atz Lee had symbolized something beautiful: love, partnership in hardship, and a life shaped by the wild. Their separation felt like a collective loss. Yet, even through her pain, Jane carried herself with dignity. She looked for strength in simplicity. She reconnected with what she loved most, fishing. Her social media posts began to shift. Gone were the cheerful family photos. Instead, there were images of her on small boats, guiding fishing tours and living her best life. Fans gathered in the comment section of her posts to offer their support. She thanked them, responding with brief gratitude and humility. She also often implores her fans not to troll or direct their anger at Atz, which proves that even though they are no longer together, Jane still cares for him. She had held on longer than most would have. She had fought for her family and the marriage she once believed in. When it became clear it was time to let go, she did so with grace. Their marriage might have ended, but Jane's story is far from finished. If you're wondering what her life looks like after the divorce, stay tuned. Moving on.
Sorry, you're soft. This is getting good.
After everything fell apart, Jane Kilcher could have disappeared. She could have walked away from the spotlight, shut everyone out, and started over in silence, but that is not what she did. Instead, she kept moving. Life after the divorce was not easy. Ending a marriage, especially one lived in front of the world, takes a piece of you. And for Jane, who had built a life far from the noise of the outside world, the silence afterward hit hard. She had been through worse, and she knew who she was. At first, she kept quiet. She did not post much. She took time to focus on herself and her daughter. She spent more time near the ocean, more time fishing, away from the cameras and the questions. She did not need to explain herself. As time passed, Jane began to return little by little. not just online, but emotionally. Slowly, her spark came back. She began sharing small moments, not about the past, not about Atz Lee, but about the things that made her feel like herself again. She shared her fishing trips, her time with Piper, her thoughts on life. Her dry humor was still there, her strength was still there, but now there was something different too, a sense of peace. Jane had spent so many years putting everyone else first, her kids, her marriage, the homestead, the show. Now, for the first time in a long time, she had the space to think about herself. She said in one post, "I do not need a man, I just need fish and peace and a few close people who get me." It was amusing but also honest. That was always Jane, saying the truth with a smile. She started reconnecting with the part of her life she had almost forgotten, the woman she was before the homestead, the strong, smart nurse, the friend, the mother, the wild Alaskan who could face freezing waters and still laugh through the storm. She and Piper grew even closer. Jane had always protected her daughter fiercely, but now their bond was stronger than ever. They spent time out in nature. They cooked together. They had long talks. Even though Piper stayed out of the public eye, Jane made it clear she was proud of her every single day. Etienne, though no longer living at home, stayed in touch. Jane had always treated him like her own son, and even after the divorce, she continued to show that love. Her family was smaller now, but it was still real, and it was still hers. Fans started noticing the change. The sadness that had once clouded Jane seemed to lift. She was no longer pretending that everything was perfect, and she was also no longer trying to survive. She was living her life to the fullest. She did not return to the homestead. That chapter was closed. Her time with the Kilcher family was behind her, and she never looked back with anger. She said once, "That life shaped me, but I outgrew it, and that is okay." Her voice became clearer with time. She spoke openly about mental health, burnout, and knowing when to let go. She shared relatable stories that helped other women feel seen, especially those who had stayed in difficult relationships for the sake of their children or their own image. More than anything, Jane became a reminder that strength does not always have to be loud. Sometimes strength looks like walking away quietly and rebuilding from scratch. She took time to heal and spent time with friends who had known her long before the cameras were on her. She joked even online, and she got back on the water, fishing like she used to, not because it was a job, but because it brought her joy. One of the most significant shifts in Jane's life was a change in her mindset. She no longer tried to hold everything together. She no longer carried people who would not meet her halfway, and she no longer apologized for putting herself first. She never released a tell-it-all interview. She never revealed any ugly secrets, and she never blamed Atz Lee for the collapse of their marriage. What happened between them stayed between them, but what Jane did do was share what it means to start over. To honestly say, yes, I loved someone, and yes, I lost them, but I did not lose myself. The fans who had supported her through the years stayed loyal. They respected her for her courage, for her growth, and her raw honesty. In a world full of fake stories and fake smiles, Jane was still real. She had loved hard because she worked hard to keep her marriage together, and when it ended, she chose peace. She did not rebuild her life all at once. She took her time, and each new step she took toward healing was hers and hers alone. She had given so much of her energy to a marriage that slowly faded away. Now, she was pouring that energy back into herself. Jane still lives in Alaska, close to nature, and now she does everything on her own terms. When it comes to moving on in terms of relationships, some of the posts she made on Facebook suggest that she is ready to date. She also posts humorous images and interacts with her fans in a free way. For some people, the end of a marriage means the end of their life, but for Jane, it was the beginning of something beautiful. Although she is not publicly dating anyone, it is clear that she is happy with her life. Meanwhile, Atz Lee is still living his rugged, self-sufficient lifestyle on the Kilcher's homestead deep in the Alaska wilderness. He is deeply involved in maintaining property and working with livestock. There is no evidence or verified source to suggest that he is dating anyone. Today, both of their children, who are now young adults, are carving their paths away from the homestead spotlight. Piper, now pursuing a Bachelor of Business Administration at Western Washington University and graduating in 2026, has embraced a quiet college life and campus involvement like the Kachemak Swim Club. She remains deeply private, almost entirely off social media, though Jane occasionally shares behind-the-scenes photos to celebrate her daughter's milestones. This blend of privacy and pride reflects Piper's thoughtful nature and resilience in a family accustomed to public attention. Etienne, meanwhile, has pursued higher education in Southern California since his 18th birthday, and, for instance, appeared on Alaska, the last frontier, where he helped with cabin building during his father's recovery. He continues to share occasional updates via Instagram, spotlighting his passions for fishing, music, and outdoor projects, which reflect both his Kilcher heritage and his emerging individual identity. Jane and Atz Lee have emphasized giving their children the freedom to choose whether they wanted to be on camera or not, guided by maturity rather than spectacle. Both Piper and Etienne remain deeply connected to nature and their Alaskan roots, even as they pursue personal growth and education away from the camera. Sources say that both children still relate to their step-parents, and that proves that a family doesn't just stop being a family just because the parents are no longer together. For Jane, the real story is that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away, not with anger or bitterness, but with grace and clarity. The decision that your peace matters more than holding on to something that no longer serves you is not an easy choice, but it's the best one. Jane Kilcher made that choice, and she is better because of it. What do you think about the way Jane Kilcher moved on? Let's hear your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, share, and subscribe to this channel for more inspiring stories like this. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.